Oops. Welcome to the Better Sex Podcast. My name is Deborah Catt, and I am your shameless host. This is the Better Sex Podcast, where we have unfiltered conversations about sex and relationship. This show is about the many possibilities of sex and relationship and helping you to figure out what works best for you so that you can have the relationship of your dreams on your terms. I truly believe that a sexy world creates a happier and a safer world. If you'd like to do your part to create a safe and sexy world, please hit subscribe, like, and leave a comment. Today, we are going to dive into my guest's world. This is Kim, the Tantric Lawyer. She is a bridge between mainstream and woo. Passionate about planetary and personal evolution, she uses a wide range of spiritual and scientific technologies individually tailored to the unique situations that come across her path. A seasoned tantrika, energy healer, mentor, and lawyer over 3 decades, she's originally from Australia, but has had quite the adventure over many continents and many countries. I'm so excited to have you here today, and I'd love it if you could pronounce your last name, your spiritual names, and to tell us a little bit about you. How did you get here?
Thanks. Thanks, Deborah. I'm thrilled to be here and thank you so much for having me. My name is Kim Mukti Nirjhara, and Mukti means liberation and freedom, and Nirjhara means waterfall, which is literally the reason why I first saw a tantric practitioner, because I had never ejaculated before and I really wanted to experience that. So I've been multiply orgasmic, I think, since I was a young child. I think I've been a tantric practitioner in many, many lives. So it was a gift that I brought in. So my book, Confessions of a Tantric Lawyer, a unique guide to magnetize your magical life, that's available on Amazon. It was just launched last week, talks about my story about how when I was a young child, I would use a teddy bear for pleasure. And obviously, there was a certain amount of openness that my family had that I was very, very blessed with. And as I grew up, there was a certain, some limitations, some shame, some using of drugs and alcohol, etc., as a young adult that I was determined to shift as a young adult as well. So I worked very hard to shift that in my 20s and managed to. But then once I was an energy healer, I wanted to, as I said, experience the feeling of being multiply orgasmic from the perspective of a deeper perspective. It's a different, I would describe it as clitoral orgasms are like the high notes on a piano keyboard or any kind of musical instrument. And multiple orgasms are like when you can play a symphony and you've got the whole keyboard or the whole range to play with. So I was delighted to experience that. And there was a lot of numbness to begin with, actually, in my yoni, in my sexual organs, and in my body, which surprised me because I was already a massage therapist and I was a healer. But with intimacy, it was like going much deeper. So my experience was that the practitioner is based in London, and we started with a cup of tea, an extensive questionnaire, conversation about boundaries. And I had no boundaries, like nothing was off the table for me. That's the kind of way I roll, or at least did back then. So then he sent me off for a sauna. I recall he spent about 2 hours massaging my back, and I've always been fine with nakedness. That's never been a problem. It's always been emotional intimacy. I think as a lawyer and having parents that were intellectuals, that was always my, I guess, my challenge was to be emotionally intimate and authentic. So yeah, 2 hours on the back. It's very deep. What we call de-armoring in tantra. So it's when we hold blockages in our shoulders, in our hips, in our legs, and this makes it hard for us to experience a full body orgasm and the kundalini release throughout the body. Because if we're thinking about like our job or the kids, or like how are people depending on us, and we build up that stress in our body, it's very difficult to then relax and suddenly experience swinging from the chandeliers on a Saturday night. So yeah, so it was very deep, 2 hours on the back, an hour in front. And they asked permission to go into my yoni, or to even really touch it very much. And that was the first, it was revolutionary to be asked that question. So I know
Pause you right
men,
there for a
that
second.
are different, or sure.
I'm so sorry. I'm not sure if it's my internet or your internet, but I didn't hear the question that was revolutionary to somebody asking you. So
Oh, so sorry about that. Yeah, so I am in like country South Australia at the moment. So yeah, hopefully it'll be okay for the rest of the interview. So yeah, so the practitioner asked my permission to enter my yoni, my sacred space. The yoni is the sacred space in Tantra. And I had never been asked that question before. And I was 32 years old, or 33, I think, 33, when I was asked that question. And I had been sexually active for since I was 16. So more than half my life and my whole adult life. Um, and I was like amazed. But by that time, I'd had 3 hours of beautiful, delicious melting, sometimes, on the edge of, it was on the edge, it was quite strong sometimes. And I said yes. And it was kind of teasing, it was arousing. But he didn't go straight, in like, and up, like most of my experience had been being penetrated by a finger, or, or a lingam, we call it in Tantra, which is wand of light, and healing tool. So that was the revolutionary part of the experience, was to be to melt. So my whole body would melted and became open gradually. So the technique is to start, around the outside. So to go like a spiral from the outside in, and slowly with breath, not too hard pressure on the delicate tissue of the external genitals, but to go gently around. Like, imagine if this is the yoni and it's tight, but the more we go around the outside, she gets relaxed and she gets open with trust that's built up with the intimacy.
and
So
for those of you who are listening who can't see, um, so Kim is holding her hand like a fist, and she's taking her finger on the other hand and slowly and very gently rubbing it around the thumb and the finger, so that um, as if it was a yoni. And if it were a yoni, as she said earlier, that slow and uh, even pressure helps to um, relax the yoni so that it opens. Before,
yeah, so that's exactly right. That's exactly it. So it was actually not so much rubbing, because it's such a delicate area. It was more just a
Mhm.
touch, like a light touch, or tapping on the clitoris, and a light touch. So it was pressure point work, and
Mhm.
it grew more harder and more intense as the yoni opened, because there's less sensation away from the external genitalia until she relaxes and opens up. But my experience actually was that there was a lot of numbness in my yoni in that first session. So
Mhm.
I did ejaculate, but there was numbness. I couldn't feel a lot of sensation. And I put that down to a lot of years of unconscious sex, a lot of pounding, I call it,
Mm-hmm.
where the man is trying to ejaculate and the woman's accommodating that experience, but is not necessarily relaxed without, for example, alcohol. So obviously there was no alcohol at my tantric session, and there was a lot of oil used as well. So that was the difference.
Got it. So just to kind of recap really quickly, because we jumped into this story and I'm like fascinated. Um, but so it sounds like you were seeking an experience of having multiple orgasms. So apparently
Yes.
somewhere along the line you heard that it was possible. And
Yes.
when you found your practitioner, you started with a de-armoring process. And what you
Yes.
described was this idea that, and I'm very familiar, and I believe my listeners are too, that there are, that our issues, if you will, get stuck in the tissues. And so
Yes.
when I say that, what I mean by that is, when we get scared, our body tightens up. And when we live in a situation where we're often scared, even on a very light level, there's parts of our bodies that never actually release. And so the de-armoring process goes into those spaces, those muscles, those parts of the body, and through touch and patience. And
Yes, exactly. Exactly. And emoting as well. There was a lot of emoting in that session. And I was at the time living open relationships. So I had many lovers. I didn't have a steady lover at that time. I was open relating with different men, and I was experiencing orgasmic feelings. I had by that time done a lot of practices which are probably familiar to your listeners as well, Deborah, about breathing energy up the spine, various meditations, chakra breathing to bring the sexual energy up the spine and circulate it around the body. So I had been doing those practices for a few years at that time, and yet I still found that there was that unconsciousness and that numbness in my yoni itself. And this is what made all the difference. So, my first session, there was numbness. My second, it was actually painful. It was physically painful and emotionally painful. I had a lot of anger, a lot of sadness. And
Mhm.
it took a couple more sessions, perhaps, until the pleasure started to really increase. Although it was there, I'm sure it was there. Like we're talking, I'm 55 now, so I'm going back in my memory over 20 years. My recollection is that it was quite hardcore in terms of my letting go and emotionally and physically. And then it took a couple more sessions to get really, really, really good with pleasure.
Beautiful. So just a quick reminder, some of the techniques that we often talk about, especially in connection with Tantra, are the movement, either the big movements or the little movements that happen sexually, breath, intentional breath, and sound. And sound can be the oohs and ahs of ecstasy, and they can also be the sounds of anger and pain and rage. And for you, and this is a very typical experience for women, is that there's the numbness, then there is
Yes,
there's often anger. Underneath the anger
yes,
is often grief and sadness.
yes,
And then
yes,
underneath that, we can bring that pleasure energy, that sensual energy, that into the mix. And the healing of the anger and the pain is often the pleasure. Did I get
yes,
that right?
exactly. Exactly. So in a really long session, like a typical tantric session, there is a weaving of the pleasure with the anger release. So you might be having a multiple orgasm one moment, and the next you were like screaming out, anger abuse, projecting it onto the practitioner. So that was my experience, was that it was like a spiral again, and the spiral is a very potent symbol of the kundalini as the energy weaves the emotions. And yeah, we're complex beings. I was also part of beautiful, very, very, I guess, exclusive tantra group workshops where we would have genitals massaged in a group. And so I witnessed other women's experiences and other men's when they were having this very extremely intimate massage. So I saw very, no two processes are the same. It's very difficult, and even between one day and another. So yeah, it's just like this whole other worlds and universes were opening up for me. And when I was invited to be trained one-on-one, I said yes, because the experience that I had of doing what we call yoni lingam massage with my practitioner was, he describes it as a friend at the back door rather than, like someone bursting the front door open. So the lingam is half erect when it enters, and he actually massaged my yoni in a circular spiral fashion with his half erect lingam until my yoni really opened up. So that was extraordinary for me. I had never experienced that. And I had many awake lovers, or who I thought I was awake. I thought my lovers were too. But what I experienced was just like another level of what you're talking about, with all the emotional release and the beauty and the pleasure and the joy, and experiences that can go on for many hours and even days. So you just leave the bedroom when you need to eat or pee or, get some fresh air. So,
And I just
yeah.
want to take the opportunity to point out the power of a soft on. Many of the clients that I work with around what they consider to be erectile dysfunction. And
Mm,
so what I part of my belief system, and you can tell me if this is something that you've encountered, but it's not so much that there's dysfunction, it's that there's disconnection. That,
yes.
that people, that men with penises don't always understand the joy that is possible without an erection. And so I love that you brought that up and bringing that to the field here. I
Yes,
wanted before
completely.
I wanted
Completely. Yes.
Before we jump forward, you used the
Mm.
term Kundalini a couple of times.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
and in fact, we jumped in before I even got a chance to ask what your definition of Tantra is. So I would like to just pause for a moment and have you talk about like what, because Tantra is a big word and many people have different, it comes from different lineages, it has different teachers. And so when you use the word Tantra, what are you pointing to really?
Thank you for that question. Yeah, it's a really misunderstood concept, and a lot of people just think about sex. They think Tantra equals sex, but actually, it comes from a Sanskrit word, which is one of the oldest languages in the world, that means to note, which is weaving. So it's weaving the different parts of ourselves together. So it's weaving an expansion of energy. The different parts of ourselves are, we all have an internal inner masculine, inner feminine. We have our mind, we have our body, we have our soul, we have our emotions. So we have different energy bodies. And then, if you want to keep going into the energy field, we have the astral level, we have the template level, we have the angelic level, and etc., etc. Depending on what model you use, it can go on forever. So the Indian spiritual system is extremely complex, and I don't pretend to be an expert on it. I am the kind of practitioner that I like to delve into what resonates in the moment and take what works and use really, really simple language for it. So, Kundalini for me was energy. It just means energy, like energy traveling down, up and down the spine. And Tantra means weaving and expansion. And to me, it's a deeply spiritual practice, and spirituality is a deeply personal concept. No two people's understanding of it or relationship to it is the same. So we're all very, very unique. And I would hope that all tantric practitioners are working with things like basic boundaries, the ability to say yes or no, the ability to say no before you can say a full yes, and working to expand and weave their energy. But it's an unregulated industry. There are all kinds of practitioners, and we're very human. And it's an area where it is common as a tantric practitioner to develop feelings for a regular client, or even love at first sight. The feelings of love can be very, very intense. So this is part of it's a very much a tightrope that tantric practitioners walk.
Thank you for that. And I thank you for the very personal view into the idea of being a practitioner. And, when I like to think of it that, the relationships and the experiences practice, but the emotions are real and the
Mm,
humanity is real. And
mm.
the very, it's a thank you for just really shining that light there, because I think as practitioners of this incredibly beautiful and potentially healing art, it's often very misunderstood. And it's often very, what do I want to say? It's,
Distorted, perhaps,
I beg your
or judged. It distorted or judged.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm,
I mean, I
mm.
I mean, I have the belief that as human beings, we need touch, we need holding, we need relating, we need
Absolutely.
every
A
part of.
100%.
When I was in massage school, one of the things that really kind of was like just such a disconnect was there was this whole thing of like, oh, the body is beautiful, it's amazing, it's got these incredible possibilities to them, except these 8 inches. These 8 inches, like don't exist. And it was just not that it just like those parts of the body, all parts of the body need to be touched with love and attention. And it doesn't necessarily mean arousal. It doesn't necessarily mean sexuality. Not that
Exactly.
things, not that those things are bad, but that's not always what we're looking for. I know that.
Exactly.
So so yeah, it's a very,
Exactly.
as you said, misunderstood and distorted
It
experience.
is. It is. And I would describe myself as more a Tao tantric practitioner. And I talk about Taoism in my book as well. So, Taoism, again, is an extremely spiritual practice that is based on longevity. So, the massage techniques I've done through Taoist healing are the Kasai Netsang, which is the genital massage, and the Chi Netsang, which is the belly massage. So, these are two forms that focus on these areas of your body, which Western massage completely avoids and gets really uncomfortable with God forbid a man might get an erection, or a woman might get aroused, like, or feel uncomfortable more like. Um, Not everyone likes their belly being touched at all. I did a massage course with a lady who said, please, my belly is off limits. You've got to leave it alone. It wasn't a Tantra course or a Tao course, it was a Chinese massage course. But there is some level of discomfort because it's very, very, very intimate. Tao massage, like other Chinese massage modalities, I'm sure you've experienced, can be often not pleasurable. It's it's about moving the toxins out of the body, and it's quite intense. So it's no different when you come to the belly and the genitals. Like, we have so much plumbing down there that if you put it all end to end, a lot of our veins are one cell thick. They would go around the world several times, and most people don't think about it. They don't think about how it needs touch, it needs pleasure, it just needs space, healing touch.
Beautiful. So I've been trying to figure out a smooth move over to like how do we talk about your law experience? Because
Yes.
so this is my abrupt and unskillful hop over because the book is Confessions of a Tantric Lawyer, and it's
Yes.
about your magical life. And so I'm so curious. Um, tell us a little bit about your background in law, like what inspired that and how did it weave itself into your tantra world?
Thank you. Yeah. So, my book talks about how I woke up and I was quite awake sexually, but there was the healing part really came in my 20s when I started to do social justice law. So, I was from a highly educated family, very professional. A professional career was the only option, like not kind of creative pursuit was possible or known about or it was frowned on as being not secure, financially secure. So I realized that I had absolutely, no training as a lawyer in anything to do with emotions.
Mm,
And most of the stuff I was really emotionally messy. It was family law, criminal law, where there was multi-generational trauma, there was a lot of poverty, and most people who are in prison are, they're educated to about 6 level. That's their education level, got multi-generational poverty and PTSD and all kinds of things. So I saw patterns. I started to upskill. I started to do counseling, psychology, and then breath work. It was through breath work in my mid 20s that I experienced my first Kundalini awakening. So that wasn't sexual as such, but it was full energy moving through my body moving, and I'm seeing visions. So my third eye was opening, and I got a really clear vision to move to the country where I did more of these healing trainings and had a more balanced life. And then when I became a healer, it was very much in my 30s, it was separate. The tantric healing was obviously quite separate to the law. In the UK, people knew I was a tantric healer. They didn't care. It was very, very open. My first bus trip in the UK, the bus was driven by a boss with incredible nails and heels, and she drove like a bat out of hell. Like London is a place where kind of anything goes. Very, very different Australian legal culture, for example, which you couldn't get more opposite. So I was weaving these two opposite parts of myself together as best I could in separate practices. And, it wasn't always easy. Sometimes I just did tantric healing, from 2004 to 2010 when I came back to the UK. Sorry, came back to Australia from the UK. And then after that time, I pretty much did law and did a lot of volunteer work. Like I did a lot of tantric massages with good friends. And I offered, I think I worked for donation more as a healer and a tantric healer until I retrained with my original teacher at a Tao tantric course in Thailand in 2016. And I added Kasai Sang and Chi Sang and a whole other lot of modalities. Practice. Again, it was very separate to the law, which I was doing part time, but I got amazing clients from all walks of life, including extremely corporate people, highly educated people that saw their lives change. Like it was so dramatic. They went from depressed, unhappy, health issues to the ones that really worked at the techniques were unrecognizable, in a couple of years. Like caught up with an old client who saw me every day, like every week for 6 to 9 months, caught up with him the thing year. I didn't recognize him in a cafe. Like he was working out, he had love, he was doing, water fasts, he was embodying all the techniques that I'd thrown at him overnight. and it was extraordinary. So, this is our human potential. And I realized that law was just really, it's a broken system. The systems are broken. It's just like it's very clumsy as a tool for change.
Mm-hmm. I'm
Yeah.
curious if you could talk a little bit more about, so you mentioned that the law is broken. I'm curious what a fixed version of the law might look like for you.
I'm very curious as well. I've been diving into First Nations law for over a decade now. So I've been working with elders. I worked recently on a new law to embody Aboriginal benefit sharing, and did a lot of workshops with Aboriginal people. Um, like it's cutting edge intellectual property, cultural, intellectual property. What does it look like? What does it mean? It's really changing fast in Australia. It's difficult to put your finger on because we had cultural heritage laws and a referendum that went down in Australia in the last year, in key jurisdictions, statewide and federally. But what has happened is people now are thinking about it more. They're thinking critically about it. You're seeing a lot of challenges to the legal system from all walks of life, from all spaces. So people who want to have 100% choice over their health, and people are mobilizing, and um, I see a lot of dynamism at the moment, and I see a system that's not coping, systems that are not coping very well to actually embody the pace of change.
Mm-hmm. So I just want to get a little bit of clarity around, because being from the States, I'm not exactly sure what you mean when you're talking about Aboriginal heritage cultural laws.
Exactly. Yeah, it's complex and it depends on who you ask. And in Australia, we have so many, like over 250 language groups for Aboriginal people. So First Nations is an area of scholarship, and it's also an area of networking that's worldwide. So critical race theory is huge, all over the world. So I was looking at critical race theory in terms of legal systems, which are quite similar. So you'll have similar but different, I certainly was borrowing some beautiful scholars that come from America, because I think that that's where often new ideas come from, is the American scholarship. Um, Although we all have quite similar but different legal systems and First Nations peoples in every country. So when I was in the UK, I was vibing with my own First Nations people, which were I went to Druid conferences and goddess conferences and gatherings where people were celebrating seasons, like we were saying at the beginning of our call, the solstices, the equinoxes, and these traditions that existed before Romans came and changed them, and then the church. So they went through a couple of some distortions, but they're still strong. They're still strong in our communities.
Beautiful, thank you. It's funny, we were talking earlier, so this we're recording on American Christmas, and I was saying that I'm less interested in sort of the commercial holidays that you're supposed to be um, celebrating, but I'm very interested in things like solstice or the equinox or the full moons or, traditions that celebrate the human connection to the earth and the earth's connection to us, because we are part of each other, and we have a symbiotic relation.
Exactly.
With
Exactly. So the story I heard about the origins of Christmas is really beautiful, and it actually comes from the human connection with the divine and divine guidance. It's quite a short story if you to hear it.
Yes.
It came from Nordic. This is a story I heard anyway, that comes from the Nordic lands where there was a lot of snowfall around the winter solstice, and the shamans would actually feed agaric mushrooms, which are hallucinogenic, to their reindeer, and then they would drink the reindeer pee. I'm guessing that they probably mixed it perhaps with some other herbs and made a brew out of it, and the shamans would have vision of the villagers, and they would see, for example, they might be able to forecast the harvest, or the amount of children that might be born, or whether there would be a war and where it might come from, where sickness might come from, or famines. And they would take these blessings down the chimneys to the villagers. So they must have had a signal to put the fire out. I'm coming down to give you your blessings. So maybe they had to light a fire and then let it cool. So, that level of detail is not known. But I really like that story because it ties in the red and white of Christmas and the green. And there's a beauty to it, and it just rings true. It vibrates as true in my body.
I love that. Yeah, I was talking with a friend of mine who's got a farm, and she was diving in and told me the reindeer story, but she was also talking about where the elves came from. And apparently, it's also a Nordic tradition that there are little people that are specific to keeping an eye on your house, and
Yes.
they're tricksters. Um, so they will make things and break things. But you want to, treat them with respect and tell them good stories. Apparently they like good stories. Um,
Yes, yes, it's very important to tell good stories for the beings that exist at all levels that we can't perhaps see with our visual eyes, but are definitely here, from elves to dragons and goblins and everything in between. So yeah, there's certainly a strong culture that First Nations people have, and of my own First Nations, which originated from Germany and Scotland and Cornwall and places like that, where they really believed in the little people. I had a trip to Iceland after I did in 2016, and they still apparently might move a building if the little people tell them to. So it's fascinating.
Definitely listening to the earth is an important part of many traditions. And I'm curious, like, so thinking about, bringing the information back, and especially the work with First Nations, the work with social justice, and bringing that together with Tantra. You make it seem like such an easy jump. But
It's
I'm one.
well, it's crazy, really, Deborah. It is crazy because I've had experiences of working, for example, with abused people in my legal environment, and then with tantra, in the evenings and on weekends. So I feel that as a person, as a human, it this is the two poles that we have, is the pleasure and the trauma that we're dancing with in the physical plane. And the more we can be with both, the more we can heal it within our own bodies, and therefore on the planet, because we take that out to our communities. So um, the more, like, I feel like writing the book and coming out and saying who I am, it is a really big part of that, because we all have potential to experience all of this in our bodies, and how much of it we do at any one time, it's a deeply personal decision that also depends on where we are in our stage of life. So I'm at the crone stage now. When I was at the height of my tantric time, I had multiple lovers, different days, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, perhaps, an extreme amount of orgasmic, pleasure, everything in between. And now I'm at the crone stage. I'm interested in more community leadership and education.
Mm.
So it really depends on the age of the listener. I'm not sure what your demographic is in terms of age, but I'm really, really happy, and I feel so grateful to be able to share some of the knowledge and wisdom and skills and techniques, and hopefully help some people who are a little bit earlier in the journey, like a younger version of me, was why I wrote my book.
Oh, I love hearing that. That's so good. So, in a moment, I'm gonna invite you to go ahead and share more about where you're at and how to find out more about you. But first, I just want to tell people how it is that they can support the Better Sex podcast. And so,
Yes,
as you all know,
please support the Better Sex podcast.
thank you. As you know, sex is a complex subject and it can make or break a relationship. And unfortunately, most of us don't get to have these kinds of unfiltered conversations. And that's why I'm offering a sexual mastery breakthrough session. This is a personalized one-on-one experience so that you can have more of a satisfying sex life. Because let's face it, a podcast isn't enough. You have to have more practice and more skills. So if you're ready for the tools and tips and exercises, if you want more, then please check out the show notes to book a sexual mastery breakthrough session. Because you know what? Life is too short for bad sex. And, in this conversation with Kim, one of the things that I keep coming back to is the power of sexual energy. It's the power to create, it's the power to support. Um, I mean, you didn't say this specifically, but one of the things that I imagine is part of your passion for the work you do is this creative energy. And
Exactly.
while you mentioned that you're not in the phase of using it for sexual pleasure so much, you're using this creative energy to do something for others, to, as one of my teachers likes to say, to love out. And that's a really beautiful thing. So I'm curious, Kim, first of all, is there anything that we haven't mentioned that you want to just throw into the mix? Because this has been an amazing conversation. As somebody with a background in law, I don't often get to, combine these two pieces together. And maybe there's more of us out there. I just have been looking in the wrong places. But so is there anything you want to add about your journey, about the work that you do, about what it means to be a tantric lawyer?
Thank you. Yeah, it's a really interesting thing. And something I started to do during COVID was weaving, clearing energy blocks with a legal problem. So I had clients from all different situations and walks of life, and I was able to help them activate their Kundalini energy to hold a vision of a perfect, most best outcome for them and all concerned, and lead them through that process in a one-on-one session of hour of power, I call it, with a bit of email support before and after, to a 3 month, when someone's moving from significantly different circumstances to the vision that they want. That weekly support is really, really important. So both of those options were offered, and a lot of wins, a lot of beautiful, dream lives created through that. And the book talks about a lot of testimonials at the front. So it is very difficult to just summarize it just in a few words on a very short podcast that's directed more towards the sexual tantric side. But definitely, I'm a big fan. You only have to look at a newspaper to see how much bad news there is around, abuse, blah, blah, the Me Too movement, sexual abuse. It's just feels like it's on the rise. It's actually coming out of the closet. It's been there forever, and it's through beautiful work like what you do and your colleagues that it's actually being healed in our bodies. And that's the only way. It can't be done just through the mind.
So just to be super clear, and I think it finally clicked to me what it is that you mean by being a tantric lawyer, which is that you take the problem in front of you, whatever the conflict is, and
Mm.
you actually bring all the tools of Tantra, the meditation, the breath work, the movement to the problem so that it
Yes,
has a resolution. And I love what you said because this is so important. And this is the biggest, in my opinion, the biggest failing of the law system, whatever it
yes.
is that it's not the best outcome for all for all concerned. It's the best outcome for, the generally speaking for one person
For
or
the most powerful with the most money,
yeah,
often.
yeah.
Yeah, exactly. For the one with the deepest pocket. And look, when I was doing family law, which I've done on and off for 35 years, practitioners know this. Legal practitioners know this. They joke about it. They joke about how, oh, well, there should just be a room with, big bats and big cushions so you can, get all the aggro out and, big boxes of tissues. So it's body oriented psychotherapy that we include in our tantric sessions that makes all the difference. And these are techniques that were developed by Wilhelm Reich, a student of Freud, and Osho, and other very, very controversial figures. These are people that ended up in prison for what they believed in and what they were teaching. So, it is very, very edgy. It is stuff that makes a lot of people feel uncomfortable, but it does work, you know? So
I
I'm holding a place for it.
I love that. I mean, I'm imagining there's a whole, as we're starting to move more, at least here in the States, for, trying to move family law more into a mediation state, into more of a co-parenting ideal, into more of a like child-centered dissolution of whatever that original agreement was. Like I can just imagine my fantasy would be like a judge sends both parties to de-armoring for 6 months before they can resolve
Exactly.
their
I
relationship.
Exactly. I had lawyers in my energy healing training in the UK and in my mystery school training that I did in New Zealand. So that was a very deep 6-month immersion where there was open relating, and we were encouraged to go towards triggers with Eros and run Kundalini with people that triggered the fuck out of us, as well as people that we were attracted to. And that that there were lawyers on that course, and we joked about how amazing it would be if we could say, Your Honor, I'm just going to go and shift some anger, and we do some anger release, and swearing in a corner, and we come back, thank you, Your Honor, for that opportunity, I'm ready to continue with missions now. But it's one of the most emotionally repressed there are, as all of them probably are,
Mhm.
politics and etc.
Yeah, and one of the things that you just said just reminded me that one of my teachers talks about the fact that triggers and an attraction um, both have the same energy, right? There's
Mm,
the energy is the same. Much of
mm.
it is the story that we put on it. And, it's like sometimes we can feel something in our bodies and it's like, oh, is that turn on? But then we look at the person that we're with and we're like, oh, no, I couldn't possibly be turned on by that. And it's like, well, guess what? You got some turn on there. I know that one of the most,
Exactly.
and I know that for me, one of the most important things that I learned from being a practitioner was how to find attraction with any body, right? With any spirit that was in front of me in whatever version they showed up as, right? It's like the
Mm.
practice is, can I love you where you're at, right?
Exactly. And I experienced that as being revolutionary when I did a course with where there was mostly women, and so I was running Eros with women before I had really explored a lot of Eros with women, and realized that, like you say, the body doesn't matter. They can be either sex as long as we're open to running that energy. And the triggers were at a personality level, and they came from my past. The man remind me of their partner. So yeah, it's a fascinating field and deeply personal.
Absolutely. I love it. Uh, so on that note, I just want to thank you so very much. I'm going to invite you to pronounce your spiritual name again for me once.
Yes, Kim Mukti Nirjhara.
Mukti Nirjhara.
Yes.
Yay, I got it right. All right. Well,
You
I just want to
did. Perfect.
thank my guest and follow her on social media. She has a YouTube channel. She has a website, the Tantric Lawyer. She has a book out
The
and
tantriclawyer.com.
thetantriclawyer.com. Thank you very much.
Yes.
So please follow her on social media, check out her book. And, this conversation is so there's a place where this idea of finding the love and finding the triggers and bringing all of this together with our personality and our spiritual burnings and our spiritual desires is such an important conversation. So if you know somebody who could benefit, please share. Otherwise, if you could like, comment, and subscribe to it would be super helpful to help get the word out. So again, thank you so much
Thank you.
to my guest.
Thanks. Just if I could quickly just say that my book is still a special launch discount price for Christmas, and I'm extending it to America and the UK for your Christmas day. So 99 cents on Kindle, Amazon Kindle, Confessions of a Tantric Lawyer, a unique guide to magnetize your magical life. Special price, Amazon Kindle, 99 cents in your country. Or you can get the paperback. You can get it for $14.95. And I'm also offering discounted mini sessions that you can book online as well on my website.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. And
Pleasure.
again, check her out on social media, get the book, and do your part in creating a better, sexier, safer world. Thank you so much.
I'm into that.